Hi, I'd like to tell you about our Lord and Saviour Sappho. So after coming out as a lesbian 6 or 7 months ago, I decided to try and throw myself into lesbian culture as much as I possibly could, which admittedly was limited because I currently live in a small town in the UK, which meant that the kind of social life that is an option in big cities was not available to me, and traveling to those big cities was a bit more difficult than I had anticipated. But I tried to make it work, and I did that through engaging with media, following content creators, and listening to discourse from within the community about anything relating to lesbianism. And I do genuinely think that doing these things in the beginning did make it easier for me to feel comfortable experimenting, or at least beginning to experiment with where I sit on spectrums, both in terms of how I present and also what my sexuality is in general within the lesbian label. And I realized that because one of the goals that I have with this channel is to help other people through sharing my own experiences and generally trying to be the person that I always wanted to look up to when I was struggling with my identity, it seemed like sharing some of these things might be beneficial to some other people who are struggling with where to start on their post-coming out journey, or at least one person, which, is the entire point. So today, I am taking you through my kit list for a baby lesbian. Basically, what I need you to imagine for this video is that you've come to stay with your older, cooler gay sister, and she decides that she's going to give you her saged wisdom from her older and wiser perspective. Shut up. Number 1 is podcasts. Now it's 2025. Everyone and their mother has a podcast. And although that can make it overwhelming to find things, it means that there are podcasts on pretty much every single topic, including podcasts about being gay. The one that I started listening to after coming out was a podcast called Chosen Family, and it is made by Ashley Gavin, Elena Joy, and Mac Injimi. Ashley's a comedian, Elena is a YouTuber / training therapist, and Mac, I believe, is a social media influencer on mainly TikTok and Instagram. But they answer fan-submitted questions about life. They talk about updates within their own lives and generally chat, as most podcasts do, because they answer fan-submit questions during the episodes. They hit on some really interesting topics. Like an episode that really stuck with me was when they talked about their first queer heartbreak and going through their first breakup after coming out. And that was really helpful because when I listened to that, I was going through a breakup at the time, which was, awful. And I can talk about my thoughts about queer heartbreak at another time, but it's really useful if you don't have a lot of queer people around you already to have resources that you can go to, people who've been out longer than you, to answer the questions about how things might be different than for your straight friends. So things like podcasts where you get to hear people's experiences about people's lives who have been out a bit longer than you is really helpful. So highly recommend. Number 2 is really sweet, and I had a lot of fun doing this, and that is going back and rewatching things that you watched before you came out of the closet that first started to make you think that you might be gay. For me, that meant watching things like the Carmilla web series, which is a lovely little series that is a little time capsule for my heart, and it's a modern retelling of the lesbian vampire story Carmilla. It's not massively smooth. It was a web series, so it didn't have a massive budget, but it's very sweet. I really loved it when I first came out as bi when I was a teenager, and it's just good. It's just good. I may have nostalgia goggles on, but I really liked it. And the second thing I watched that comes to mind is Barbie and the Diamond Castle, because you cannot look at me and tell me that film is not gay. I'm sorry. If you think that those 2 little boys were anything other than a studio plant to make them not seem as gay, I don't know what to tell you, because you cannot be helped. And one thing that I do want to go back and rewatch, which I haven't yet, is Pretty Little Liars, because Pretty Little Liars came out when I was a teenager, but when I very first started to notice that I might like girls. And at that point, it was a case of they started showing lesbians on screen and I turned it off. I vowed that I would never look at it again. So that one is I need to watch it again for the catharsis of getting over that fear. When they say homophobia, it does genuinely sometimes mean that you're just terrified of being gay. And that was 12-year-old me. And this kind of starts a little bit of a trend that will go on with some of these points, which is I can tell you what I did, but you really need to tailor it to your own experience. But kind of the important thing is reconnecting with that version of yourself that started to realize who you were, but was uncomfortable or afraid or didn't know what it meant. Going back to those things with the acceptance of who you are and getting to enjoy those things fully is really healing to your inner little teenager. Number 3 is very specific, and that's because as part of my engaging with media, I read a book that helped me really deal with my internalized homophobia from my teenage years. Also, I feel like reflected the inner turmoil that I had, very much in a heightened way, but in a way that I could understand and kind of empathize with, and that is Sunburn. Now, before I did this video, I did look at a little bit about the reception that this book has had online, and I understand that some people, because of the way that it's written, found it a little bit triggering, found the main character problematic in the way that she handles certain situations, particularly in her treatment of her male friends in the book. I'm trying not to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it. And I'm not going to go into a full review here, but I grew up in a very small island community. Not actual island, it was an English island. And again, I'm going to try and be quite vague here, but it was quite religious and small community with the kind of hive mind attitude. And so a lot of the fears that the main character has, and a lot of the internalized fear, and just the idea that like she knew who she was, but that was never going to be an option for her. So she had to find a way of pretending that she was straight, because her worst fear was anyone finding out that she liked women, that she was a lesbian. Like, really hit home for me. And if you want to read more about it, there's a very depressing post that I put on Substack that I will link in the description. What I loved about the book, the way that the author described how the main character loved her girlfriend, was some of the most beautiful writing I've ever heard. Like, I cannot epitomize enough how much I am a yearning poetry lesbian. I literally got Sappho's poetry tattooed onto my body, because obviously the book deals a lot with religious trauma, because the character is in a deeply religious community. Taking the religious imagery and the idea of devotion to this idol that is the thing that has traumatized her, and transforming it into the language that she uses to express her devotion to the woman that she's in love with, like she's this goddess. And like, I just get the feeling that she describes her like a stained glass window in a church. And I listened to the audiobook, and I did find it difficult to listen to at times, because it was so related to how I felt when I was growing up. But listening to that book and coming out the other side of it, I found so therapeutic and so healing, and kind of like a trial by fire. But I got through it, and I was the better for it, I believe. So it might not be the easiest read, but I do think that that kind of thing is worth going through to help you process traumas that you have. And we'll come on to that in number 4, because number 4 is therapy. Now, I am somebody who has been in therapy for a good few years now. I think I'm coming up on 3 years of therapy. And I do not genuinely believe that I would be in the position that I am and be as openly myself as I am if I hadn't started going to therapy when I did. And even if it's the tiniest amount, there is still a lot of trauma surrounding growing up as queer. The way that society is heading at the moment, we are in a regressive situation in terms of gay rights, in terms of attitudes towards queer people. Investing in your mental health is something that I believe is vitally important to everybody, but in this situation, doubly so. And I completely appreciate that therapy is something that is not accessible to everybody, that it is expensive and it is difficult to find unless you are in a crisis situation. But if you can and you have the ability to, I would recommend even going through the NHS. Whatever options are available to you for therapy, I would seek those out, because you deserve to be able to be your happiest, most authentic and most healthy self. So do not waste another second on this earth not putting those steps in place to become that version of yourself, please. I'll tell mom if you don't do it. Number 5 is finding queer social groups in your area. Now, as I said, I live in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. So finding groups of friends who are queer was very difficult. It's a little bit easier for me because I work in the arts, admittedly. And that's where social media comes in. Googling, searching on Facebook for queer, social, insert town name here, LGBT, insert name, pride, insert name. Googling those kinds of terms will help you find spaces that cater to queer people, and will mean that you are more likely to find other queer people who you can become friends with, who you can ask questions to, and may mean that you feel more comfortable experimenting in the ways that I mentioned before about how you present, how you show up as yourself in those spaces. And you'll also probably be around people who understand what you're going through because they went through it themselves when they were coming out. So it generally will be a safe space for you to do that. Number 6 might be controversial, but I'm putting it in anyway. and that is the Ultimatum Queer Love series on Netflix. Now, is this a way of making this video topical because season 2 has just come out? Maybe, perhaps, perchance. I am a butter servant to the algorithm. I watched this literally just after coming out, and it was recommended to me by a friend who had been out a lot longer than me. And I think as like somebody who hadn't been around a lot of lesbians and not witnessed a lot of lesbian relationships before, even though it is a reality show that is intended to be entertaining and therefore the people behave in ways which are not typical of normal behavior, I do think that it helped me kind of assess certain things that might be trends within relationships that are sapphic or lesbian in some way. I do think that it helped me start to investigate relationship dynamics and start to look at kind of how people in the community might behave, things to expect, the worst of the worst perchance. It's also really fun and really messy. And I'm on like episode 4 of season 2 and it's really good. So bite me. Number 7 is another like Willow being too sentimental one, to be honest. But when I came out, one thing I did was I went back and I listened to love songs again. I know. So I have a theory that the reason why there's such a stereotype of lesbians getting to relationships really quickly and falling too hard too fast is because the way that I felt when I realized I was a lesbian was so close to the way that love is described in basically every love song that it made it really difficult for it to be like, yeah, but it's also the first, like, you know, like it's the first time you've been with somebody. It makes it really difficult to distinguish what is love because it's like the feeling and what is you just actually feeling how you're supposed to feel for the first time. Does that make sense? I remember driving back from work and listening to I See the Light from Tangled and being like, I have never understood these lyrics before, but finally I know what they mean. And I cannot express how much of a weird feeling it is to like go back and listen to songs that I had like listened to for years and had loved, but like hearing them from the new perspective of knowing how it felt to actually feel like that was kind of eye-opening. So it sounds silly, but like it's a sweet little thing to do, and like actually allowing myself to listen to those songs and think about girls for the first time. I'm really showing how emotionally repressed I was. That's what I'm getting from this video. But it's also just kind of beautiful and romantic, and like that's why I love being a lesbian. It's like the poetry and the music and the yearning and oh. Yes. Now, number 8 is kind of generally what I was talking about experimenting with presentation, but more specifically, don't worry about looking too gay or not gay enough. At the beginning of this year, I think in about March, I started going to monthly queer poetry workshops, and I really struggled to decide what I wanted to wear to the first session. I called my mum actually and like sent her a load of different options of what I was going to wear, and I was so freaked out about it because I was simultaneously really nervous about it being very obvious that I'd just come out and looking too straight, but also looking like I was trying too hard to look gay, like in a way that would come off as offensive, like I was putting on a costume. I think over time I've gotten more comfortable with it, but the only way I got to the point where I was more comfortable with sort of how I dress now, i.e. the queer-coded best friend from a 90s TV show, was by dressing in certain ways that were like fashion that I'd seen other lesbians wear, and trying things, even if it's just putting a load of clothes on in your bedroom, having a friend over to help you pick outfits, like finding how you want to present. If you don't want to change anything about the way you present, that's also incredibly valid. I come from a costume background, and I am a firm believer that clothing is how we communicate who we are to other people before we meet them, i.e. the cover that you put on a book to describe what the book's about. Experimenting with how I present in terms of clothing was something that was really important to me when I came out, but I am aware that it's not something that will be essential to everybody. So take that one with a pinch of salt. Fashion shows in your bedroom are never a bad thing in my opinion. Number 9 is another little like silly cute thing, and that is buying a little pride treats wherever you can. Even if you're not somebody who is like loud and out there and extroverted and wants to create an entire YouTube channel to regurgitate your trauma for other people's entertainment, this is a really cute and subtle way to just sort of reaffirm to yourself like the excitement of coming out and like being yourself. It's Pride Month at the moment. I have decorated my flat a little bit. I have some rainbow bunting that I've put up. My favorite pair of shoes to wear at the moment are what I call my lesbian Nikes, which are just some Nikes that are white, pink and orange, which are the colors of the lesbian flag. So what I mean is just like finding things that have rainbows on them, or whatever your pride flag is. Like this little phone charm that I found, the unassuming eye would describe as sunset themed and like summery. I know that it means that I'm a lesbian, and other people who are in the queer community might also recognize it, and that kind of like coding and signaling and that kind of thing. And finally, number 10, which may come off as some kind of shameless self-promotion, is following queer women-loving women content creators online. This is one that again is very tailored to you. I might not give you a list of people who I would recommend, but what I would suggest is going on to TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media you consume content on, and searching for lesbian, Willow hashtags, and just scrolling through and liking content that you relate to, following people if you see a lot of their content and you like what they post. Not only will that change your feed in terms of who you follow and what content you see on a regular basis, but it will also adapt your algorithm to show you more of that content, so it will help promote that stuff through to you, so you get kind of a more sapphic For You page or suggested content when you go on social media apps, which means that it's tailored for you and is stuff that you need advice on and you will relate to, and will help you feel more comfortable in finding community in those spaces. So that is my kit list for a baby lesbian, made by a baby lesbian for baby lesbians. We love it. If you have enjoyed this video, hitting all the buttons down below me on the screen here would really help me out. As a queer creator online, engagement really helps boost videos like this to the people who need it. So the purpose of these videos is to help people who need them. So in order to get them to them, they need to find them. Liking, subscribing, commenting help boost the video in the algorithm, so they might be put on the screens of a person who might need it. So help a girl out and hit the buttons down below. I hope that this video was helpful to you if you are a baby lesbian who's just come out, and if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them down below. If you're not a baby lesbian and you still have questions about lesbianism, put them in the comments down below. I will ask people who are wiser and older than me. And yeah, I have nothing else to say. Bye.